Ladies and gentlemen, in last night's budget, I announced the Morrison government's plan to rebuild the economy, to create more jobs and to secure Australia's economic future. COVID-19 is primarily a health crisis which has created an economic crisis like none other. Unlike the Australian recessions of the early 1980s and 1990s, this pandemic has created both a supply-side and a demand-side shock, driving a sharper and a deeper economic downturn. And our economic toolkit has been constrained, with monetary policy having less room to move, with the cash rate at a relatively low rate entering into this crisis. COVID-19 has seen the Australian economy go into recession for the first time in almost 30 years. Tragically, many Australian lives have been lost, and many Australian jobs and Australian livelihoods have been lost too. In response, the Morrison government has provided record support to Australian households and businesses to cushion the blow and to build a bridge to the other side of this crisis. Last night's budget set out the next stage of our economic plan as we move to the recovery phase of this crisis. This plan enables Australians to look to the future with confidence and with hope. Today, I want to outline why the measures in last night's budget are the right ones at the right time to help get hundreds of thousands of Australians back into a job, and how this plan will rebuild the Australian economy and make it more stronger and more productive into the future. COVID-19 has tested our health system and our economy. Through swift and decisive action on the health front and our world-class health system, Australia has achieved one of the best health outcomes in this crisis among any of the other countries in the world. As we have seen overseas, without the strong health measures put in place to contain the spread of the virus and the actions and sacrifices of so many Australians, many more lives would have been lost. Our economic response to the crisis has also meant that we've avoided the fate of so many other nations, and we have performed better than so many other advanced economies. Had we not responded the way we have, we would have seen cascading job losses and business closures across the country. Our response softened the blow. It kept Australian businesses in business and Australians in jobs. Our actions put a floor under the economy. JobKeeper has been the centrepiece of our initial response. It has been an economic lifeline for around 3.5 million Australians employed in over 900,000 businesses. When the JobKeeper payment was announced, consumer confidence increased for 9 consecutive weeks. Along with our other response measures, we were able to replace much of the income that was lost when the health restrictions hit. In the June quarter, overall household disposable income rose by 2.2%. The average income of our lowest income households increased by 20% between the March and the June quarters. As the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank said recently, the fact that household incomes rose in the quarter does not mean that the stimulus was overdone. Absent the stimulus, he said, the decline in GDP and employment would have been significantly larger. Without these initial and urgent measures, 700,000 more Australians would have lost their job, and 200,000 Australian businesses would have run out of cash by the end of the year. Many would have had to close their doors, and many would never have reopened. Unlike most other advanced economies, Australia did not have a double-digit contraction in economic growth in the first half of this year. And already there are signs that the Australian economy is fighting back. Businesses are reopening their doors and people are getting back to work. Of the 1.3 million people that lost their job or were stood down and saw their working hours reduced to zero in the early weeks of this crisis, some 760,000 of them are now back at work. As restrictions continue to ease across the country, we need to ensure that our policies are supporting and accelerating the recovery. Our crisis response policies were the right ones to get us to this point. In Treasury's review of the JobKeeper program in June, they found that the JobKeeper program has a number of features that create adverse incentives which may become more pronounced over time as the economy recovers. Dampening the incentives to work, hampering labour mobility and the reallocation of workers to more productive roles. And it keeps businesses afloat that would not be viable without ongoing support. So with our economy reopening, our policies are transitioning away from JobKeeper, which is scheduled to end in March. Our policies, as outlined in the budget last night, are designed to get Australians back to work and to rebuild our economy.